Hey there. My name is Justin Wigard, and I'm going to introduce to you a visual annotation of a comic. And specifically, I'm going to choose a comic out of the Collected Prairie Pothole by John Porcellino, who is a Chicago-based cartoonist who is absolutely wonderful. This is a collection of short, cartoony memoir comics about John's life living near the Chicago area. And so what I'm going to do is go through with a small fine tip black pen along with a few colored markers here and work through some of the visual formal traits of comics and graphic memoirs, but this could easily be applied to other elements like graphic medicine or graphic history or even what have you, right? So I'm going to choose a page at random. I'm kind of giving spoilers for this really, really wonderful comic. But I think the one that I really want to work on is this one called Swedish Fish, right? So I'll kind of talk it through with you all. And maybe even, I think what I will do is increase this a little bit. Apologies, John. I'll buy a new one and treat it a little bit better and weigh it down on this side. So to start off with, we see that we have a title here. So I'm just going to write title. You don't need to, but it helps me kind of think about it, right? This is important enough that John has titled this specific comic, right? We also have the title of the comic, but this is the sort of like, I'm going to say, cartoon title here. Now, in this first panel here, we see a caption, or narration, rather. Swedish fish are the kind of fish you get at Joe's Confectionery on Higgins. Previous readers will know that this is a childhood John and presumably his mom, but could be a stranger, right? We're not necessarily sure. But we see our, this is important enough. I am going to grab my little yellow marker here. It's a little green because I was coloring it with green, but yellow. John. Front and center. Protagonist. I think that this is important, right? These are things I'm noticing in real time. We also see Joe's Confectionery actually drawn in here. So we can see that all of these things are actually represented here. It's not just that the text and the images are separate, but they are actually together, right? Second panel here. You buy them by the ounce, and they come in a little white paper bag. What do you say? Says somebody offhand. So this might actually be his mom, right? I'm going to draw a little dotted arrow. And so what I want to note here is that we have off-screen character. And part of why I'm noting this is because this is a very simple cartoon in a lot of ways, but it's actually masterfully simple, right? It's really difficult to draw comics just this iconic and abstract. So we see an off-screen character speaking in second panel, right? They're introduced here, but they speak over here. And John is remembering this, right? So we're kind of putting this together. This is him remembering. What do you say? John says, thank you. And this kind of bursts out of the panel here. I want to circle back to this. The best flavor is red, exquisite, complex, the kind of flavor that asks questions. I love that. It's so evocative. But this is important, right? John is telling us that this is actually red, even though the entire comic and all of his work is most often drawn in black and white. He's telling us that it's red. That's the flavor, right? And these are, I'm going to draw a line here to sort of separate. I'm going to say like taste-centered memories, specific experience, right? It's not just that this is, I'm going to move this here a tiny bit. It's not just that this is a taste-centered memory, but that John is using that. He's kind of drawing this and trying to make a connection with us, right? We all have a favorite kind of candy, and if not, you probably should. I'm particularly fond of Starburst. But John is sort of saying that that's the best flavor. The best flavor is actually a color. It's the kind of color, it's the kind of flavor that asks questions. What kind? open-ended. It's poetic, right? Taste equals color, but I should probably say flavor equals color, right? But then there's this really, really lovely. I'm just gonna kind of draw in the gutter here. Time jump in the gutter between the panels, right? John moves from being a kid or remembering that he's a kid into how he presumably perceives himself now in 2022 as a man with thinning glasses, potentially thinning hair, and a little bit of stubble, right? Stepping back in time. At this point, this kind of has a circular effect. And I'm going to draw this all the way back up to here, right? Snaps us back to first panel. I'm going to write what I think is an immersive memory, but it's also a fragment. I'm going to say it's an important fragment. You can kind of see how my brain sort of works in real time here, right? It's an important fragment of I'm going to say mem here. I like this because, and I'm going to sort of draw right on this line too, right? Fourth panel tells us we are actually in present. Time is fluid, but all at once. And I'm also going to write here, this is very bad handwriting, very small, but I want to get this in because this is important. This is a very Suzanne's kind of term here, right? So we've got gutter here. This is bringing in some of our comics criticism. Suzanne's talks about this all at once idea of comics happening all at the exact same time because we see the page all at once, right? Encourages us to recall childhood, candy, joy, right? Even though this is messy, I know, but what it does is, and what this is kind of starting to show us, is that we see all of these things happening, all these formal traits, all these critical traits as well, right? These, and John may not necessarily be concerned or even aware of unflattening. That's not the point. What the point is how we as readers engage with it and try to understand it that much more here. Since I've got a red marker here, and hopefully John doesn't mind, I can't help thinking that I really want to see what this looks like colored in just a tiny bit. So, ooh, that's a really dark red. See, this is part of why I would need to color it in really, really lightly, and this marker is just not super suited for it. Maybe it is. Coloring it in adds so much more weight, right? Without color has equal weight in the previous memories, but it takes up so much of this space, right? As Joe's, right? This fish, its size, takes up the exact amount of space as Joe's, more or less, right? As much as John actually trying to say thank you. Each of these things, and actually, we can kind of do one further. I'm just going to box this off here. This is getting messy, but I hope that you kind of see the point. Panel all 4 equal size weight, right? Each of these are balanced, and so we can also say that this is a principle of design, and we can also talk about any of the elements of design, right? Like simple, clean lines, or we can say things like contrast and space, right? The fact that John has this fish without any kind of without anything else touching it, right? So it adds a different kind of weight to it that is not necessarily present in maybe this image, where John is, we'll say, let's say space and emphasis. John is small against large, busy store. Right. I'm going to underline this just so it's a little bit easier for my reader to sort of find this. Hopefully, I think I'm still kind of centered roughly, sort of moving between, standing and sitting and drawing. Here we can kind of see some of these elements of design all sort of interacting and clashing, right? But I think the thing that's important for me is this, this fish page and then this jump, right? And so if I were to continue with this, the things that I would focus on are, I would focus on this page here, this panel here, and I think I'm even going to highlight it. And then here, right? Let's say 3 and 4 have weight. But at the same time, right, these have narrative weight. I really want to focus on these things, but John purposely gave us 4 panels. Part of that is because of the constraints of creating this comic for a newspaper, right? He specifically created 4-panel comics for the newspaper that this was all published in, the Prairie Pothole. But at the same time, we need this build-up, right? If we just had, say, these 2 panels, it wouldn't quite work. We'd feel really disjointed. All 4 panels, but without 1 and 2. All 4 panels build together to create a sequential narrative that's also, again, like I mentioned over here, it's circular. This is really messy and complex, right? But that's also how we operate as visual thinkers, as reading comics. All of this stuff is happening all at once. So when you're completing this visual annotation assignment, it's easy to take a draft at it, right? If I were to do this over again, I probably would, maybe clean it up a bit, maybe even start with this circular part here and then see what else emerges from there. Each one of these will look a little bit different, and they'll start to develop a little bit more as you do more of them. But I also think that there's, sometimes you might want to work in pencil. Sometimes it's helpful to have a couple of colors on hand, like, my highlighting, for example. And I think that there's also a lot that is left unpacked. We didn't even talk about, this panel here where John has just a couple of really great little iconic symbols here that show exactly, like he's so excited about getting this. And he says, thank you. And it's very muted, right? But there's an infinite number of things to parse and articulate and annotate. And this is just in a 4-panel black and white comic on a short page, right? You can do this with any comic, and you should, because that's part of what you're going to be doing with this project. But I hope that this helps, and also part of what I'm looking for in this are identifying key comic elements that emerge out of this, right? It's not just that we have a cartoon title, but that we have that the gutter is doing something specific, right? It's identifying and unpacking or analyzing. 2 sides of the same coin, right? it's observing and then drawing inferences, drawing meaning out of those observations, and then sort of putting it all together in a visual annotation that actually visualizes, that serves as a record of the way that you are engaging with this comics page, that you are thinking about it in a demonstrable way. As you do more of these, it's going to grow more complex. You'll develop a system that works really well for you, whether that's working all in color, whether that's having a specific color-coded track that you're working on, or maybe that's using thicker pens or thinner pens, or whatever it is, right? Maybe it's trying to recreate the drawing on your own. I think and I know Linda Berry talks about this a lot, trying to copy over another artist's work or trying to copy another artist's work and sort of replicate it on your own is a really helpful practice, because it gives you a deeper appreciation for how they actually convey this, right? For John, he has so little here that each drawing, each line matters that much more, right? This panel here with John, grown up John, might look weird if we took out one of these panels, or it might look a little bit weird and maybe give it even more intensity if we add in more lines, right? There's a specificity here, a craft here, and I want you to dissect it and unpack it and try to draw out something important to you as a reader, as a critical reader, right? I hope that this was helpful. If you have any other questions, please email me at wigardju@msu.edu. And thanks for looking. And again, apologies to John Porcellino for marking up his comic, but you should also go check it out. You can find it and others at uncivilizedbooks.com, or just go to search around for John Porcellino and look for his Patreon and his website and grab something that looks great to you. All right, have a good day.